Paul always suspected King Crab was more of a title than a name. And he wants to be the first human to bend the claw. Because one day, the crustaceans will rise, and only Paul will be spared. Foresight's a wonderful thing. Invest in innovation, including 3D printing, with OPTO.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of OPTO Sessions. We're thrilled to have Phong Lee on the show today, President and CEO of MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy was one of the first BI platforms, maybe even one of the first. I don't know, Phong can update me on that. Providing AI-powered business intelligence software today. It's also well known for adopting a Bitcoin as its primary treasury reserve asset. How are you today, Phong?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Ed.
Is it the first? Was it one of the first or the first BI platform, do you think?
We were, there depends on how you define BI, but we were one of the first. We launched the company in 1989, started offering analytics on relational databases in 92. We were the first to do that.
Yeah.
We offered analytics in the web in 98. We were first to do that, right? So browser-based analytics, which most people consume it today. We were the first to offer analytics on mobile devices in 2008. We were one of the first in the cloud in 2012. You mentioned it. We were the first to offer fully integrated AI capabilities last year. That was 2023. So yeah, we're one of the first, if not the first, with most of the technological innovations in BI and analytics that you know and use and love today.
Yes, and then it's obviously a much bigger, because a lot of people would know MicroStrategy because of its relationship to Bitcoin, but it's obviously there's another company there. It's the same company, obviously, isn't it? But it's been around 30 years or longer than that. Is it? Do you say or over 30 years? And long history in innovation in BI. So it's great to have the opportunity to go over that.
Yeah.
Where are you based, Phong? Are you? Where's the head office today?
I'm based in Northern Virginia, in the United States. So consider this a suburb of Washington, D.C.
Yeah. Okay. And is that head office there, or do people work remotely? Or
yeah, this is our headquarters. We have about 1,800 employees worldwide. The majority sit here in North America, where our headquarters is in the D.C. area. But we have large offices and development centers in Poland, in China, in India and Argentina. And then we have field offices, as an example, in London. We have a pretty sizable field office in London also.
Brilliant. Great. Well, I think we could start just for those people who don't know everything about what MicroStrategy does in BI. If you could provide an overview of what it is today, where your focus is, size of the company, key industries served, etc., that would be really good.
Yeah, and I'll start with just describing the company as a whole, because you had also mentioned our Bitcoin strategy. We're the first public company to put Bitcoin on our balance sheet in a major way. We said it was our primary treasury reserve asset, that we did that in 2020. And I mentioned all those things together, all those innovations, because we're a technology company. We constantly push the edge of technology innovation, whether that be in BI or in Bitcoin. We're well known for both of those things. In the BI software space, we primarily serve the large enterprise. So think about companies greater than $500 million in revenue. And if you think about the Fortune 500, about half of them are our customers. We have about 4,000 customers worldwide, millions of people using MicroStrategy. And we're proud of that heritage and that history. The types of companies that use us span the gamut across every single industry. Retail is our largest industry. I'm sure you folks in the UK know Sainsbury well. They're one of our largest customers. But if you look across Europe, Schwartz, which is owns the Lidl brand, is a large customer of MicroStrategy. Starbucks is a large customer of MicroStrategy. That sort of fills in sort of that retail sector. In the pharma or healthcare sector, 9 out of the top 10 pharmas are MicroStrategy customers. So think like Pfizer, AstraZeneca, companies like that. Large governments are using MicroStrategy, a large part of the U.S. government, but government institutions in the UK and France and Switzerland and Germany are MicroStrategy customers too. So we're fairly well distributed across industries. What do people use us for? the terms business intelligence, analytics, decision support systems often get used interchangeably. But I like to think of it as they are empowering frontline and corporate workers with data. And we're that touch point, right? We're the actual application people are using. If you think about the data space, you have data, you have source applications, you get data warehouses, you have analytics tools. The analytics tools are what people are touching, right? Whether it be a dashboard that sits in a browser that gives them different information to analyze their business, but more so, a frontline worker is using a mobile application. So I go back to Sainsbury. You walk into Sainsbury, people are walking around with iPads or handheld devices with MicroStrategy sitting on top of those, right? Giving them real-time inventory information, traffic information. You walk into a Starbucks, the manager there every single day looks at MicroStrategy to understand how much they've sold, how many grande lattes they've sold. Or you walk into a McDonald's, same thing, right? So you have people out there that you're interacting with as a customer using MicroStrategy to understand the performance of their business and make day-to-day decisions, right? Do I need to order more oat milk? Because there's been a run on oat milk. That's happening in MicroStrategy. And then they're actually making those transactions too. So it's not just like, sometimes people think of analytics as pretty dashboards.
Yeah.
That's just scratching the surface. I'm talking about actual applications, just like you have a consumer application on your phone, right? Like I now think about a business application that has analytics, has workflow, has actions that are taking place.
Okay.
That's what we're doing. Very embedded into businesses. And you can imagine every decision someone makes every single day has data involved in it, right? So you need something that brings in the data, helps drive the decision, and allows you to make that decision. That's what we do.
And so when people think about your product suite, is it quite custom? Is it for each business enterprise you bring on board, you're basically working with them to build or put the data in the applications that help them solve some use cases rather than an off-the-shelf SaaS sort of platform? Is that correct? Or?
Yeah, I like to think we're the best of both worlds. So we're a data platform.
Yeah.
Right. So you put MicroStrategy in, and then you build applications. So it's to your point, it's not something that you just plug in and day one it works. That said, we're SaaS, right? We're cloud based. You can deploy on-prem too, but we're cloud based and we're low code, meaning you don't need to have someone who knows SQL and is a coder. It doesn't hurt, but you could deploy in weeks, right? Like this is not it takes you a year to deploy something. You can literally deploy something and start using it in weeks because it's cloud-based and it's a low-code platform and very easy to use.
And is it possible to dig into a few more examples of the insights that some of these firms are getting from?
Yeah. So think about, let's take a pharmaceutical company like Pfizer, right? Like, and if you know how that business works, you basically have salespeople going door to door to visit hospitals, to visit doctors, right? To sell more of their pharmaceuticals. And if you're a salesperson walking into a hospital, before you walk in that door, you need to know everything that you can about that hospital. You need to have external data about the number of patients and turnover. You need to have data about, who did I talk to last and what did they purchase and what is their purchasing frequency? You need to know who are the 18 people that influence the buying decision in the hospital. You need to know the current price of the drug that you're trying to sell. You know how much inventory you have. If you think about all that, that doesn't come from one place. It's not a CRM system. It's not an ERP system. It's not. And then maybe you get 30 minutes. You need to be prepared right when you walk in that door. And then when you get out, you need to know exactly what action to take, what to do. And if the doctor asks you a question about something that he or she bought 3 years ago, you need to have that information right then and there to make that deal, to make that sale. That's really just a complex analytic problem that brings in data from multiple places. And you almost want something that then coaches the individual pharmaceutical rep what to say, what to do, what to offer, how to place the order, right? And so some might say, well, that sounds like a traditional CRM system, but CRM only has certain data sources, right? And CRM is good if you're sitting at your desk, right? But if you're out in the field, you want something that sits on a nice iPad or an iPhone or a mobile device, right? And so you're walking in there, you have all the data at your fingertips. You want to look at this and that. You want to place this order. You might even turn it around and show it to this doctor and say, let me show you something. That is a custom built mobile app using MicroStrategy for most pharmaceutical companies. And that's where the power comes in, right? Being able to build a custom app very
Yeah.
quickly and update it constantly, right? It's real time that data is coming in. That's what we're used for. And you can imagine the more the person is interacting with a customer on the front line, the less you want them fiddling with the data, and the more that you want to support their ability to have a conversation, right? So that's an example. You walk into a hotel, you walk into a Hilton hotel, the people behind the desk, the managers, hey, Ed, nice to see you again. Beyond just, hey, I notice you're a diamond tier customer, right? Like, thank you for, this is your 15th stay at this hotel. I noticed that you like adjoining rooms. And I also noticed that last week you were in Paris. How was your stay in Paris? Nice. Okay. Well, I just prepared an adjoining room for you here. And I also noticed that you like to order breakfast. So can I go ahead and place that order for you ahead of time? All of that is happening in MicroStrategy.
Yeah. And how has the focus at MicroStrategy evolved in recent years with the development of AI, etc.?
Yeah, AI has been very useful internally because it speeds up our development process. Products like GitHub, Copilot, right? Like I have a developer who's writing code, and if now it can complete the code for him or her, it speeds up their development process. It takes some of that stuff away, and they can focus on the design and the application itself. So internally, it has provided some efficiencies for the company, and we keep pushing and pushing and pushing on that. And then on an external basis, we have now built it into our platform to provide a lot of what happens in MicroStrategy to be AI accelerated. And what happens is now you can interact with our platform using natural language. So take the example that I just gave you with a pharmaceutical salesperson. Now, the next thing they want to do is they want to ask a question of the data. Or maybe the doctor they're meeting with has a question. Well, now they just type in the question, right? Like if the report, historically, if the report didn't give you the information you needed, you either had to go back and ask your analyst to update the report, or you have to have the capability to self-serve and run a pivot table or move things around. Yeah. Now you could just ask questions of the data and it gives you the answer, right? And so we were the first company really in the BI space to do that, right, at scale. And we've learned a lot from it, right, about how do you get the data, the answer more accurately. If you think about Gen AI, the use cases in Gen AI are primarily working on unstructured textual data or pictures or videos, right? That's actually an easier problem to solve because when you predict something using Gen AI that's textual, it's okay if it's a little bit wrong and a little bit creative, right? But what we've done is we combine Gen AI with the ability to ask the data questions. So now we're talking about numerical structured data. It's not okay if the answer is just sort of okay. Yeah. You want the answer right and the same every single time. When I ask, this particular employee that I met with last week, what his or her compensation needs are for the next, 6 months, or where did they rank in the quartiles of people in the company in compensation, I don't want a different answer every time. I want the same answer every single time. So that's the problem that we have been working on solving is the predictability of the answer, the accuracy and predictability of the answer using Gen AI.
And that's a really interesting point because people are used to this hallucinations of AI. How do you go about minimizing that issue? Is that just, you tell me.
Yeah. So if you think about what is Gen AI good at, it's good at interpreting the question, and it's good at interacting in rich language, and it's good at taking the answer and producing it in a nice format, right? So that's what we're using Gen AI for. You asked me a question, right? Like, what is this particular employee in the company, where does he or she stand in terms of compensation rank versus everybody else? In the past, you had to go call up an analyst or run your own analytics, and maybe it'd take you 2 days to get a response. Maybe take you 2 hours if you do it yourself. We can do it for you in 10 seconds, right? And so how do we do that? The hard part is interpreting the question. And so we use the Gen AI to say, okay, this is what that person meant when they asked that question. And the Gen AI doesn't just tell us what they meant. It tells us what is the query we should run, right? The SQL, if you will. And then we take that query and we run it against our data. So when you take that query and run it against the data, it's going to give you the same answer every single time. So there is no hallucination. And then we take the answer and we say, okay, now package this in a nice format, give it a nice graph of that. So we're not asking the Gen AI to actually answer the question. Mm-hmm. We're asking it to interpret the question and then we answer the question, right? And so
That
think
makes a lot.
about what it's doing is taking the role of an analyst in your
Yeah.
company, and it's now playing the role of analyst, right? And what does the analyst do? They interpret, they're the business analyst. They understand the question being asked, but then they run the question against the data. They're not sitting there and guessing the answer. They're actually running the question against the data, the query against the data.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I had another question actually, because you mentioned that you've been sort of incorporating this into your internal processes, GitHub, Copilot, etc. What sort of percentage increase in efficiencies are you seeing today, and how much do you think it's going to impact it moving forward? Just from your perspective, what you've been seeing today, just it'd be interesting to know.
Yeah, we've seen, it depends on the role, right? So in areas like software engineering, the actual coding, we can see a 15 and 20% increase in efficiency, right? Like somebody in marketing who's creating nice designs, right? Like creative backgrounds, right? We can see even more than a 15 to 20% increase in that particular job, right? With copy, right? Whether you're an attorney or whether you're a writer, right? We can see some efficiency in editing, in comparisons, et cetera, right? Maybe even more than 15 to 20%. But it can also be distracting in some cases, right? Like, people say, hey, I like it to summarize my emails, right? Like, and people like the use case, it's cute, but it hasn't really added to productivity so far, right? In that kind of an area. So it's been great, as a company who both uses it to help revenues externally and sells it and uses it internally. It's nice to be able to match those things up and keep pushing the technology faster and faster. The other thing we've done, and that has been very effective, is we've created a bot for support cases, right? So it used to be somebody that's using MicroStrategy has a question about how to work on something or thinks that there's an error and that they need help, that they would log a support case with us, right? And we'd help answer it. And now we've been able to deflect 20 to 30% of those cases, because the first thing a lot of the folks will do is they'll just go ask the AI bot. We call it OPTO Expert. It actually sits in the bottom right side of our website. Someone goes in, they log in, and they can start asking questions. That's been very helpful, right? Because if we're not answering the basic questions that someone can get just from asking questions of a knowledge base, and the bot's able to interact, and actually the bot will log a case for you if it indeed finds there is a defect or something that needs to be worked on, enhancement, then those folks no longer have to answer the simple questions to get to work on the complex ones.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see how it's developing. Really good to hear that lots of companies are trying to adopt it as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Just going back now to some business strategy questions. It'd be interesting to know what your current growth plans are for the next 12 months. What are you focusing on to increase revenues?
Yeah. So we started this conversation that we're a tech company. We're inventors. We're innovators. So, I told you every 5 to 10 years, we invent something that no one else has done before, right? And it started off with analytics, became analytics in the web, became analytics on mobile devices, analytics in the cloud. We invented this technology we call hyperintelligence, which is zero-click analytics. You browse, you sort of mouse over something on a website, and it gives you the information right then and there. It just pops it up. We invented that in 2019, we included AI, wouldn't call that an invention, into our BI platform. We invented the idea of putting Bitcoin on the balance sheets. For me, we're a product-led growth company. Sure, are we going to grow via entering new markets, adding more sales folks, be more effective at our marketing? Sure. But we're all about product-led growth, so we're going to invent the next thing. And we have something we're going to release likely in May of next year. That's going to be the next evolution of BI, or maybe even beyond that. I would say maybe a brand new product category. So we're very excited about that. And this solves this problem. The next problem we're trying to solve is with AI and with analytics, you have to know the question that you want the answer to before you get the answer. And that is actually daunting, right? Like everything in AI right now is about prompt engineering and knowing exactly how to ask a question. And if you're a frontline employee, you don't you're busy, working at a Starbucks, right? Like, do you really want to be able to perfectly phrase the question before you get the answer? Or do you want to be told the answer to the question you didn't even know to ask. And that's what we're working on next. And I think that's a beautiful combination of BI and Gen AI coming together, not to force you to get the question perfectly right, but to not even force you to ask the question at all. That's the problem we're going to solve next.
So I had another question about what you believe the future of BI is, and I suppose you're sort of encompassing it here. How far does that go? Do you think it will be taking actions without someone having to interpret results? Is it, to that length that you'll...
That would be the goal, right?
Yeah.
And then it's a business decision whether you want to do that. But if I know all of the context of an individual or of a company, let's start with an individual. If I know, go back to a pharmaceutical sales rep, right? Or a front desk manager at a hotel, or a field manager at a fast food chain, right? Like, if I know all the context of that person's schedule that day, I know what his or her role is. I have all the applications they go into. I know what their schedule of their employees looks like. I know what the foot traffic into that store is or into the hotel. I know everything about the doctor the person is about to meet. And that's all there. You already know all of that. You probably do know what the question the person wants to ask is. And if you know the question and you know the answer, then could you program it to take the action too? You could. Do you want to? Maybe, on lower risk transactional things, right? And then you've just automated away the mundane task of that employee so he or she can spend more time with the customer, right? And that's, I think, more exciting. If you think about most employees, they're spending, 60, 70% of their time looking for the data, the answer to the question, as opposed to spending their time with the customer. Right? Like, how often do you, as a consumer, do you walk into a retail store, a shop or something, and all the people don't have time to attend to you because they're busy doing something in the back room or the back office, right?
Yeah.
Like, by the way, that's not what they want to do either. They'd rather be talking to you. That's why they got into this job, not to be like messing with a report to send to their manager or their inventory folks to know what to order next. That's not what they want to do. So if we can automate all that, gives the customer a better experience, gives the employee a better experience too.
And as another example, things such as ordering the manufacturing inputs to some product that's, I don't know, they might have forecasted that they've seen a trend rising and the demand for it. Is it the sort of predicting these things and taking actions? Is that another example of what you sort of...
That's exactly an example, right? And right now you've probably got a team of analysts looking at that. But if you can automate that, then you move faster. There's less error. So I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, I've always, because we have to deal with a lot of data here as well, and there's always too much data for a human to interpret everything going on. Right? It makes sense for a machine or software to make that task a lot easier for you.
Yeah, you don't want the analyst to rule the world and to make all the decisions. You want the computer to rule the world, to make the decisions, those types of decisions, and you want the individuals who are interacting with customers to have time to do.
Yep, no, definitely. Well, thank you for that. Just moving on to touch on Bitcoin a little bit. Can you elaborate on MicroStrategy's Bitcoin Treasury Reserve strategy, just for those who might know, and why does it exist? What the plan is?
Yeah, I'll start sort of big picture. What is MicroStrategy? MicroStrategy is defined as a Bitcoin development company. We do two things. We buy and hold and advocate for Bitcoin. And so that's sort of our Bitcoin strategy. And we run a profitable, growing software business, right? That primarily sells and services business intelligence. That's what we do. So the two things. Now, we talked a lot about the BI side. The Bitcoin side, first and foremost, is the most revolutionary monetary technology ever identified. It was invented in 2008 by Satoshi Nakamoto, who no longer exists. He experimented with it, he played with it, gave it away to the world, and realized that there was importance in the next digital asset, the next digital currency, if you want to call it that, to have no founder, have no corporation, have no country, have no CEO. It's the apex digital asset. There really are no other digital assets that matter, which is why we're a Bitcoin only company. We decided in 2020, rather than continue to invest our cash, and we had about 1 times revenue in cash, $550 million, into Bitcoin. I've been in finance for a long time. I was CFO at that point in time, now the CEO, and I'm a technologist too. But, it's always been common for corporate treasuries to say, do no harm, right? In fact, you have nothing better to do with your cash. Start with number one, put in short-term treasury bills, right? Which is what a lot of companies do. Back then, they were gaining 2.25%. Now they're gaining more than that, but still less than the inflation rate. So if you're making less on your corporate treasury with short-term treasury bills than your inflation rate, you're actually diluting the company's capital. So that's strategy number one, right? Strategy number two is do something with it. Invest back into the company. And we do that. We take our certain parts of our excess cash flow and we innovate. We invest more into new technology. So it's great. That's a good thing to do. You have to have a high hurdle rate for that, right? Like it depends on what your alternative is. If inflation is 7% and your investments back into the company are only gaining 5%, you're actually still diluting the company's capital base, right? You're not even clearing inflation. A third strategy a lot of companies do is M&A, right? They go buy something. I think that works in certain spaces, maybe like manufacturing, where you get economies of scale. But in software and technology, it can be considered to be very dilutive to the customers and to the technology. Our biggest competitors in 2005 were Business Objects, which was bought by SAP, and further by now, they declared it end of life. Cognos, which was bought by IBM, no longer the platform it used to be, and OBIE, which was owned by Siebel and bought by Oracle. And that's also now been replaced with new generations of software. My experience is technology investments are more often than not good for the shareholder sometimes, bad for the employee, bad for the customer, bad for the tech base. So taking your excess treasury reserve and doing dilutive in the technology space is not a great thing either. So the last thing you can do is you can give it back to your shareholders in the form of either dividends or in the form of stock buybacks. And that means you're decapitalizing the company. It means you've got nothing better to do with your money than to give it back to the shareholders who will then decide what to do. Most people invest in a company because they believe in its leadership, they believe in its strategy. So if you can come up with something better than the shareholder can, you should. And then you don't decapitalize the company, so you still have the capital. So long story short, the best thing to do as a corporate treasurer is to find the highest return asset and invest in it. And that's what we did. We found Bitcoin, which on average at that point in time was growing about 40 to 50% a year. I think to this day, it's still at 43% a year. And if you can find a 43% a year growth asset and invest your cash into it, and it's perfectly liquid, it is very volatile, why wouldn't you do it? And that was the strategy we came up with. We were the first public company to decide that Bitcoin should be our primary treasury reserve asset. And it's been very successful. It has caused us to be the number one performing stock in the S&P 500 in the world. So it's been an extremely successful strategy. And when you combine the Bitcoin development company and buying and holding Bitcoin with what we've done on the BI and the software space, an operating company that produces excess cash flows and profits, we have something that is unique and no one else in the world has ever.
Yeah, no, incredibly forward-looking. So got in that early, and it's working out very well today. I had a question. A lot of people ask about just basic accounting, just so you could sort of make the opaque account and stuff a bit clearer for people. How do your balance sheet? How do the Bitcoin purchases affect how your balance sheet is visualized, basically?
Yeah, it's confusing, right? Like the original accounting for Bitcoin when we launched the strategy in 2020 was to treat it as an definite intangible asset. What that means is you treat it like art. If it goes up, you don't get to show it on your balance sheet or on your income statement unless you sell it.
Okay.
If it goes down, you have to take the loss on your balance sheet and your income statement. And so every single Bitcoin that we have in our balance sheet is currently valued at the lowest price in the existence of that particular Bitcoin.
Wow.
So you only recognize the losses and you test for the losses every single quarter.
Mm-hmm.
So if I bought Bitcoin at $63,000. And last week, Bitcoin went down to 53,000. At the end of this quarter, I will have to show that Bitcoin on my balance sheet at $53,000, and I would take that $10,000 loss. When the Bitcoin goes back up to 63 or to 73 or 83, I don't show it on my balance sheet.
Wow.
So you only get to recognize the losses. Obviously, that's confusing. So the SEC decided in December of 2023 to change the accounting for digital assets to fair value accounting, which means that now, instead of marking it down only, you mark it up and down every single quarter, which is better, much better. We have yet to adopt that. The requirement to adopt it is at the beginning of next year. So we've been looking at it, but that allows you then to show the Bitcoin on your balance sheet at its current fair market value, up and down, which is much more appropriate.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes it a lot clearer. And am I right in saying the liabilities are going up as well because sometimes you're taking upon debt to buy those Bitcoin assets?
Yeah, we found that there have been very effective ways to acquire Bitcoin. And one way is to access the capital markets. So sometimes we'll issue equity, right, to access the capital markets. And we've done that with billions of dollars of equity issued to buy Bitcoin. And then at times we'll access debt markets. When we access the debt markets, we prefer something that's long dated. So right now our average duration of our debt is about 6 years, right? And we prefer something that has low interest rates. So convertible debt has been our primary sort of way of doing this. And so the debt that we've accumulated has an average of 6 years and about 1.6% interest rate. And we've accumulated now about $3 billion of debt, and we bought Bitcoin with it. On average, our Bitcoin has been purchased across the last 4 years at about $36,000 a coin. And so you can do the math. Bitcoin is, right now sitting at around $55,000. We've made a pretty good sort of paper profit on that Bitcoin. And it allows the enterprise value of the company to be increased, which allows us to take on more equity, take on more debt, buy more Bitcoin.
Yep. And thanks very much, Phong. And I just thought we could have one more question just before we wrap up. I just wanted to understand more about how, as a large company is already established, how do you maintain a competitive moat in the marketplace? I mean, I know if you're focused on enterprise, you'll have lock-in for a lot of those over many years. But how do you know, with the other competitors in the space, how are you trying to maintain your competitive advantage?
Yeah, the best thing is to stay focused. Right. And I talked about companies who enter new markets, who go through dilutive acquisitions, who sell themselves, who decapitalize the company, who do things that they don't have conviction in. And that is a lack of focus. Right. The more we focus on our customers, on our technology, on our employees, on our strategy, on buying and holding Bitcoin, the better. Right. We could have certainly gone into non-adjacent markets to BI and decided we wanted to build ERP software, right? That would have been a lack of focus. We could have decided that we're going to buy not just Bitcoin, but we're going to buy some other coins. That'd be a lack of focus. You're right. It is an extremely competitive market, technology. Enterprise software, even more so. It's one of the most profitable businesses you can get into. It's long-term business, right? You keep your customers on average sometimes more than 20 years. Our top 50 customers average 23 years with MicroStrategy, right? It's an extremely economically attractive business. It's a much easier business to run. You have no fixed assets. You have no supply chain, essentially. You don't have things that are going to spoil, right? As an example. We, for the most part, don't have unionized employees, right? So it's a very easy business. And so a lot of folks want to get in, which makes it even more competitive. And the way you stay ahead of the competition is you got to innovate. You've got to stay focused. Yeah. And sometimes people might say those sound like different things. No, you got to innovate in your lane, right? Do what you do really, really well and do it better than anyone else in the world.
I think that's a really good point. I think I saw a clip recently of Steve Jobs who said something along the lines of there's going to be so many opportunities of what you can do. So the most important thing is choosing what not to do with your time. So really interesting to see that you're backing up that sort of philosophy. Thanks very much for your the chat today, Phong. It's really interesting to dig into the company a bit more, highlight a few things that a lot of people may not know. Is there anything you'd like to say before we leave today? Or
I appreciate the opportunity. We're excited about our business, both on the software side and the Bitcoin side. And we have a lot more work to do, but it's a lot of fun. Thank you.